Hi, my name is Emmanuel Sivanda, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Gradient Boost. The Gradient Boost is an online data science school looking to drive data literacy across the African continent. Welcome to our podcast. This is a podcast where we have informal chats with data scientists and other data professionals about what is happening in the data science, data analytics space across different industries in our continent, and to spread information about and awareness about data science in a fun and informative way.
Chris has disappeared, and here he is again. Nice to see you back again, Chris. I thought we lost you. Um,
No problems.
Great. So this is the Gradient Boost podcast, and my name is Jasmine. I'm one of the co-founders. We have Emmanuel Sabanda, one of our other co-founders, and we are lucky to be speaking to Chris Orwa today. Chris, who are you?
Oh, a profile just to say I'm a data scientist
Okay.
to summarize everything else. But I do a lot of I don't call it entrepreneurial work, but as well as analyzing data for different users. So currently I work for a bank in Kenya as a lead data scientist to help the bank apply data science into the banking operations. I'm also a data journalist with a local media company where I just focus on writing stories using data. I also do some trainings, mostly around data and intersection of data with other areas. Yeah, and I'm also involved with a few startups trying to figure out a few different solutions in Kenya.
Awesome. So exciting. You sound very, very busy. I watched your video a while ago. You spoke about becoming a data scientist by accident. Tell us more about your journey, like becoming a data scientist.
Oh, yeah, yes, it's true. Yes, I came through it by accident, but the whole interest started at the university level. I was trying to figure out what I'm good at and what I'll enjoy doing for the rest of my life. So by the time I was coming to the fourth year of the education, that's when I stumbled upon data science. At that point, even the term data science wasn't interested, but I took a class on machine learning, which really blew my mind. I was like, okay, if I'm able to predict this, it means there's so many application areas. And then I just jumped straight into it. At that point, I didn't know where I could get work. So together with a friend, we co-founded a company, and then we decided like let's apply the skills that we have because definitely there's someone who needs these skill sets in the market. So doing predictions, building apps, but then adding a layer that does some level of prediction or data analysis for a particular case. So we were just knocking ourselves out to see how far this would go. So that was my, I'd say, entry into data science. Just read stuff, anything I could come across. And then after the startup failed, that's when I started my data science sort of career working for different companies.
Okay, I'm glad that there's a path there. When people fall into something by accident, they don't always come out on the other side. But I'm glad to hear that happened with you. One question though. So you said that you decided to start your own company based off these skills. What were you seeing in terms of the companies that you were approaching? Did they know about data science? Did they know what you wanted to help them with in terms of their data?
Not at all.
Mm.
It's one of the greatest or toughest things you'd ever do because you have business and you have skills and you have to prove that the business problems fit into the skills that you have. And every time you mention data science or at that point we're calling it data mining. I can data mine, go through your data, figure out some patterns, and then use that to drive business logic. So other comes to like, isn't that business intelligence? And then you're like, yeah, it's sort of like business intelligence but on steroids. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And then if you compare software development, for example, I'm going to build an app for this company. I'm going to build, let's say, a website or any other digital um based product that you have. Then the client can see the result and output, and it's very visible. When you're saying you're doing data science, and then I remember like, okay, so what are you going to produce? You're going to produce a small file which it's a summary of everything else in the business, and I'm like, and how much am I paying for this? Like, no, this doesn't, this doesn't really make any sense for a particular case. So it took a lot of understanding, which I think possibly was because of our naiveness, because our main driving force, we wanted to showcase our awesome skills,
Mm-hmm.
awesome in quote, in not trying to solve a business problem. Not all companies need fancy data science work. Maybe they just need their data organized very well, and then
Mm-hmm.
to have like daily, Excel reports or monthly summary. That one solves their needs better than telling you, I can predict what your sales will be in December or in January. Like, okay, we pretty figured out. We're not really worried about that part. So yes, businesses have this not sure about what you're offering, and then even when you offer, even if they understand it, they don't see why they should pay so much money for the particular service, which is okay. But I also think on our side it was a problem of not really analyzing a business well enough to know that this is not a machine learning problem, this is not a data science problem, this is an operational problem. If they just employ two more people, this problem will disappear, or something like that.
And is there a contrast between I guess like small companies and what they perceive as the value of data science and say like larger companies like the bank you're working, for example? Do you see a difference in how they approach data science or data scientists in general?
Uh, I'll probably say yes and no. And just before answering that is, initially when like now data science was, blowing up, it was smaller company, mostly tech startups that were picking up the data science part of it. And the idea was for them, it provided them a way of competing with much more larger established company. So in Kenya, a lot of the data science skills will probably go into agriculture, health, and finance. So like, digital lending for mobile phones. For agriculture is like, precision farming, helping farmers, detect different things using IoT and then combine that with the data science. And then health, just optimizing some of the processes, data collection, because data collection is still highly manual in the country. So digitizing that and then doing some very basic manipulation that will help maybe the hospital or um, the patient for that particular case. So that being the case, it was initially, I think for me, like the first, let's say, 3-4 years, I only knew about data science within the startup areas. And then
Mm-hmm.
that's when I moved. I think now I have about maybe 3 years working for corporate. For corporate, I used to work for a telecom company before moving to the bank. So one of the things that I appreciated about big companies was that, first of all, they have well organized data. They've invested in good infrastructure to collect data. And some of those companies have data that dates back to, let's say, 10, 20 years for a particular case. They know whatever problem they want to solve. They know the pain points for that. When you're in a startup, you're always sometimes shooting in the dark, hoping that you hit something. Sometimes you
Mm-hmm.
start on a path, you fail. Yeah, that's the nature of startups. But um, if you want to work where there's data, there is enough data, well structured problems, corporates give you that very well. In a startup, you have to be a data engineer today, a software engineer tomorrow, a data scientist, a bit of a researcher, which is also a
Mm-hmm.
great thing. And then until you figure out, uh, this is how I'm going to solve the problem. Because most of the time, from my own uh, limited experience, you'd go to Coursera, Udemy, or whatever, do a data science course. And there's this funny thing I was reading about that even if you take a soldier for 1 year, train them on everything else, they only become a soldier the moment a bullet from an enemy flies through their head. This
Oh.
the uh, that's the point when they become, because now you have to know how to adapt, how to shoot back, and etc. You have to solve the problem in front of you. So you go get the skills that you have, and then you get into the market, and you realize you're never a data scientist until you solve a problem. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you're dealing with messy data, or you work for a company that either does not define the problem very well, or there's all sorts of things. So before your magical deep learning skills become useful, you have to figure out whatever it's at hand for that particular case. So far from my own personal experience, there's very corporates have invested very well in data, so data is never a problem. Uh, Also, they have structured because everyone has a KPI, everyone has something. So like, okay, I have this problem. Do you think you can help the finance department to forecast the company revenues for different regions? You have that. These are the previous sales records for that particular place. Or you're gonna, okay, tomorrow you're gonna help deal with the fraud detection system that we can want to flag transactions. Currently, we have a rule-based thing, but it's not too sophisticated to detect certain types of fraudulent transactions. So can you use your data science skills there? It's very clear cut, and you can figure out, okay, now I'll use neural networks, or I'll use Navy Base, or I'll do some exploratory data analysis and look at different types of whatever's happened before. So you'll be in that kind of environment to work with. In a startup, first of all, you are starved of data. Even like, okay, I want to build a fraud detection system. Where are you going to start from? There's no one who's going to give you the data, which is no company should put the data out there. And then actually, what type of fraud, right? But if you work for a bank or for a microfinance institution, they'll tell you, okay, we are mandated by law to report ABCD. So you already have a structure. And for us to determine this is a fraudulent transaction, blah, 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 it has to be counter checked. So you already have that, and you even have people to talk to. In a startup, you know that you cannot do anything great, but it's just a different place to work, which requires a different mindset and more skills.
Okay, so in line, I think you kind of answered the question I had, but just curious. So do these big banks, especially INM Bank, do you see challenger banks or digital banks as competition in that field, or are you? I mean, what you said about just already having the data is a huge leg up, but where do you see the threat, or if there is a threat?
There is some sort of threat, but not exactly, because if you look at a typical bank, which has like 4 key areas of providing services. The first one is to allow a customer to give you a wallet, which allows you to either receive your salary, pay other people. It allows you to do that. Second, the bank gives you credit. So if you've been with the bank for long, they can offer you credit. After that, the bank also offers you insurance and other features, but now insurance nowadays is not a core banking features. If we focus on the 2 areas, on savings and digital wallet, more startups are coming up to offer digital wallets. So, and that's where digital banks work very well. But even the best, even Revolut, which is very big in Europe, they don't offer loans to their customers. They'll allow you to transfer money. They'll allow you to do some of those really basic banking operations, because offering for you to lend money, and especially if you're lending money of depositors, there are a lot of checks, a lot of balances, there are a lot of regulations for that. So I don't think digital banks will crack that yet, or they'll take that away from banks yet. On the digital wallet side, yes, I think they'll eat a very big chunk of that from banks. So think about that. You take a mortgage. So you walk down the road, you see a house, you take out your mobile phone, take the photo of that particular house, and then the app will tell you whether that house is available for sale, how much is the cost, and automatically applies for a loan. And then a loan is granted, and then the next thing it will deliver a key to you in the next. Yeah. That if that happens, then yes, the banks will be out of business pretty soon. But because there's so much between you seeing the house and getting a mortgage approved, there's like so much processes. Some are dependent upon laws of the country, others are dependent on how much risk the bank is willing to take, and so on and so forth. And also remember, when it comes to banking, the number one factor that everything is thought about is risk. Everything has to be, yes, the technology could be better. It could offer a faster means, but it also increases the risk that you're taking. So that will probably introduce other types of, I don't know, housing fraud or something like that. Like we just see a house. Yeah, so like, okay, it could be faster, it could be better, but how much risk are we taking up for that particular case? So that's my own opinion, is that probably, yes, there will be parts of the bank that will be taken away, but the some will still remain with the traditional banks.
It's a great take. I think like we see banks as just as a bank in general, but a bank is like a mixture of multiple services. Like you're saying right now, it's like it's giving loans, it's savings and credit, it's an actual banking wallet, and it's insurance. Do you think that maybe the threat is the unbundling of banking services? So different fintech startups focusing on different parts of the bank, like what different services of the bank, and really improving the experience for those particular services, as opposed to like the one-stop shop bank. Do you think that maybe the future is more for an unbundling of the bank? Do you see more value in that one-stop shop that currently exists with banks?
Yeah, I think if we are to even guess like what the future of banking would be, you also have to look at the history of banking, where it came from and how it ended up being whatever it is today. Um, one of the biggest things I was discussing with a friend is banks are still like a warehouse. It's like, think about like Amazon. Uh, Despite Amazon being digital and trying to do everything else, they still have warehouses all over the country, so that they can make the deliveries easier for that particular case. So no matter how digital it becomes, they still need that particular warehouse. For banks, especially for very large types of transactions, you'll need a bank to be able to handle those transactions, offer a little bit of more money if you need it, provide. There's so many other products that are laid in between when a bank works as a we call it middleman between the transactions for the particular case. So when you say, and that has been a history of banks for a very long time. Uh, think about if your salary was being paid by, I don't know, okay, mobile money is very big in Kenya. Everyone has a digital wallet on their phone, but very few people receive the salaries on that. It's only wage workers who work on a daily wage that get that. And I'm very sure if you ask people, hey, can we pay you on your, it's faster, it's more convenient. I'll just walk out of the door right now and I find a mobile money agent and I can use it to pay everything else. But people like, I'm very sure people like, no, just send my money to the bank. Then from the bank, I'll decide how much I want it to go on my digital wallet. I'll want what else I want to go into something else. For certain things, I'll prefer writing a check for that particular case. So since bank has worked, in this case, the bank is acting as your intermediary of, the company is to pay you, so they'll hold the money for you until you need it, or you can withdraw it slowly, or whatever you need to do with it. That core functionality, I don't see how you can unbundle it. You can connect to the other systems, but breaking it apart, it's extremely hard. And if you look at in Kenya, if you look at like the like since mobile phones are like all over the country, almost everyone has a digital wallet. Then we're like, okay, now more people will access loans from phones than going to a bank. Well, but the number of loans, that's true, but the value of loans, if a bank offers a mortgage for, let's say, 30,000 US dollars, for you to have 30,000 worth of loans on a mobile phone, the mobile phones probably would offer, the mobile phone fintech startups would probably offer something to do with, let's say, $100, $50, right? And these are like, we call them short-term loans that, okay, I need gas money, or I need some small, amount to take care of needs. So even that high rate, high volume loans will still be taken by the banks. So things like insurance, few things have changed. Savings, like in Kenya and in most countries, you cannot save if you don't have a banking license. No company is allowed to save money. And for you to get a banking license, you'd probably need, I don't know, I can't remember the last figure, but I'll probably say something to do with like 200 to 300 million dollars to just be given that banking license. There's no startup which will pour $200 million just to get a banking license so that they can have a smarter way of saving. So what do? They create very good apps, and then they work with a bank so that anytime the regulator asks about that, they say like, okay, no, this money is actually not held by us. We've just provided the technology to allow customers to interact. But actually, it's the bank that holds the money for that particular case. So in that case, I'm not saying it's impossible, but so far I don't see how there would be a startup will come up and say like, okay, we'll offer you a nice saving thing. And all over the world, finance is one of the highly regulated. Finance, health are like one of the most regulated areas for any economy. So yes, bits and pieces will be taken away, but that core part, that especially savings, allow you to be a middle amount for transactions. I think that will still stay with the banks.
Okay, that makes sense. I guess it speaks to the trust people have in banks in general. It's very hard to counteract the trust that they've built over centuries, over centuries pretty much. But I guess we see a lot of trends in the challenger bank space where they use other data points like social media data, like smartphone data to analyze a person's credit worthiness. And it seems to be more like them trying to target people who are underbanked or unbanked to get them to be able to acquire loans. Is the banking sector trying to address issues that relate to people who are underbanked in Kenya? Is that a concern with banks from your experience?
Yeah. So the different types of banks I would call it the different types of banks. Like the customers base are very different. So, like in Kenya's one bank, the largest called Equity Bank, it's when the founders were starting the bank, the core concern was, the person who cannot afford to have a bank because you need more, you need a salary to open a bank account, or you probably ask for other documents that you don't have for that case, and then their earnings are also very limited. So they started this bank, and at some point they were offering loan based on matrimonial objects that have a lot of emotional attachment to the family or the father or the mother of the house. So, for example, you could take a loan of $100, and in collateral, they give you a bed, or your bed becomes the collateral. So, if you don't want to lose your bed one day because maybe it has a lot of memories for that kind of thing. So you could think of that as an alternative scoring or alternative data for that, because they figured out when you have some, or let's say your wedding ring, for example, it has a lot of emotional value attached to that. So you could give that. So yes, so they did that. It's a very successful bank. Has the most number of customers. Also, from a profit perspective, it's the most profitable bank in Kenya. So they have a different market. So when you look at social media data, you're going to use that to do credit scoring. And one of the things which I was just reading about is like sometimes since something is available doesn't mean you just need to use it, right? Because maybe using that matrimonial bed the data has more weight than social media data. And think about you don't control social media data. The reason why you trust your own data, for example, as a bank, is because you understand the system, you control everything. How many transactions this customer make last month? Have they made their repayments? But on social media, fast forward, we figure out like you have to prove that person's social media is also the same person in our database for that. Second thing is, from my own, I've worked with social media data before. Social media data has very limited weight in telling you anything about a person because, and even for a very long time, the kind of person I am online is very different from the person I am in the workplace. So sometimes I just use my online just to, you know, bash people around, talk a lot of nonsense, right? But that doesn't have any weight onto whoever I am. So if you're reading that and using it for anything, and then you just say I'm an idiot, and there's nothing matched. And then probably you go like, oh no, this guy always pays his loan in his time. His credit card it's always paid. He doesn't have any too many loans. He has enough savings. I'm like, okay, this looks like a good guy. So if you look at me, you just see an alternative ego or person.
Mm-hmm.
It has nothing to do with the problem you're trying to solve. So it's a data that's approached with caution, but also I don't think it has a lot of value, because when you look at the use cases, especially in a bank or even in the corporate world, people could say like you can measure the sentiment. Is this person always annoyed? Is this person always sad? But think about if you have a Twitter account which you're just retweeting other people's stuff. That's not you. So there's a lot of things. Maybe I don't know. Maybe Cambridge Analytica are the ones who probably have a very good use case for social media. But when it comes to corporates, especially banks, it's probably not a very good data source to use. Better find something else.
Awesome. I guess it ties into understanding the business context before using before analyzing data in general. You have to understand the context of the business, and obviously that gives you more value than when you understand the context of the business, that is, before analyzing data, that is, I'm guessing.
Yeah, because one of the things I had to learn very quick is look at the business first. Look at the problems that are there. Study the problem, and sometimes and look at. There's a times could be a problem. Let's say, for example, let's pretend okay, we want to onboard 10,000 customers in a particular product. Let's assume that's whatever the problem. There's a marketing department that can do the marketing. The people who have to come to the bank, and some of the operations are getting done. So I look at, okay, I can go online, predict whoever is likely to buy this product. Let's assume it's that, but that wouldn't even solve the problem, because number one thing, like in Kenya, you cannot open a bank account online. You have to go physically to a bank. It can be assisted, but the banking laws state that a human has to look at your identification card or passport and say, okay, these are the same people. Now I can open this account. So how many times, if you, let's say you've predicted 600 people are likely to need this particular product, how many times do you even go to your bank account branch? It's very, people are very lazy, right? So it doesn't really solve that particular problem. And then, like, okay, maybe instead of doing some fancy things, just give the marketing department an extra, I don't know, 10,000 US dollars. Let them do more advertisement, and then you'll get the customers. The more people know about your brand, high likely they're coming to it. So you have to break down the problem to the level whereby, like, okay, now where is the data science skills applicable? All right, so now you go, that's where you go to the businesses to understand all the processes that the businesses go through. What can be done? Is this an operational problem? Is it you need more money? Do you need to restructure anything else? Do you need to have a conversation with somebody else? You go through all that, and then sometimes you don't even do any code. You're like, okay, we're done here. Bye bye. And then you go find another problem to knock yourself out. So the problem always comes first.
Awesome. So just moving along, digressing a bit from the banking conversation. So one thing I really enjoy doing, and I saw that like you might have a similar interest, is just writing. So writing out my thoughts and explaining what my opinions are on just different topics, whether it's social topics, economic topics, or tech-oriented topics. And it's kind of how I got into like analyzing data sets too, right? It was more of initially just explaining my ideas, like using I guess like the arguments I found online, and just thought on my own. And then it became a question of how can I use data to better like supplement my existing opinions. So analyzing data sets support or not support my opinions, if that makes sense. So I noticed that you're very into like just blogging about projects you work on the side, about analyzing data sets and defining a question and writing about that. Tell us a bit more about your data journalism and blogging interests.
Okay, maybe history. I remember I never considered myself a blogger for a while, and I used to love reading a lot. So I have like piles of books around, and I just like reading interesting things. Then one of my friends was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about putting down all these your ideas into something?" Then because they're like, "Hey, because you have interesting ideas." Then I was like, well, "Okay." I'm not much of a writer. I don't think of myself as a writer, but I just decided, okay, why don't I just set up a blog, and just started writing anything that would just come into mind, whether it's a thought, an idea. But then I started thinking about, let me use, because also at that time, I always want to read about some new algorithms, some new formula, something. Thing. But when I read it, it doesn't really stick to mind until I do it. So
Mm-hmm.
every time I'll read something interesting, I would go do it, and then then I decided to use the blog to be a place where not really to showcase, but just to archive what I've done, because that then I would be how do we put it, my own record that I read about this, I did this, and then this was the outcome for that. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be correct, but this is what I did. So that's how I started blogging. And a few of the blog posts went viral. They were great. Others people were like, oh my God, this is quite interesting, the way of thinking. But for me, it grew from curiosity, because I'm always curious. I want to read something, and then applying that curiosity to the data part. So, like, okay, maybe how can I use this data to do something interesting, something weird? And I always wanted to do something that no one else has done, and something, if I read it myself, I'll be wowed, and something that has value too. That you're like, okay, took this data set, analyzed it, found out this, ABCD patterns. This is what it means, and then put it out. So that is how I got started. And then after running the blog for a while, I think 3-4 years perhaps. Then on one of the local, a few stories went viral, and one of the Nation Media Group, which is the largest newspaper in East Africa, I was asked, can you do data journalism for us? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Sounds like a piece of cake to me. And then I was like, no, it's very wrong. There's a very big difference for blogging and having to write for a general audience, and be very specific. And on top of that, applying data to it. So, the blog, there is no standard. You just sit down and write your thoughts up to the end. But here's a story that, initially I would write something that was interesting, but it had to be heavily edited so that it's available for the general, what we call the general audience. Rule number one was like, don't put any formula. Don't use the word algorithm. Don't do that. People in the street don't know what an algorithm is, and honestly, they don't care. Even if you used it to generate the results you have, don't mention about it. Just say, after analyzing data, we found this out. And then initially I was like, no, it's taking out the flavor in the story. I want people to know that I know about deep learning, and I want them to know that I used it and I know how to use it. Yeah. So, but then I was like, you can reserve that for your blog, but in this business, you have to adhere to some editorial guidelines that you're given. And then the problem came in was, when you're writing an opinion, it's pretty easy. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't have to. You sit down like, okay, I think COVID will come to an end in 2021. That's it. But if you had to write a data story that COVID will end in 2021, you have to collect data about different pandemics, how they happened, collect data about how people may have died so far, what are the current treatment plans, how is this restriction, affecting the death. So same story, two perspective, nightmare on one side. So that's why I cannot do like, hey, no, COVID, after killing 1 million people, COVID will disappear. An opinion piece, you do like 200 words, it's done, gets published. But this is it's like doing research, and the rigor that it goes into that is so crazy. So another problem is, sometimes data is not very much available in Kenya. So, and maybe parts of Africa. If you go to Europe, US, and other developed countries, it's the government has invested in very good portals where I could say, okay, I want to know how many water lines are there in the city. I want to know, fire hydrants. I want to know when this was installed. You can just go to your local government and get websites and get all that data, but it's very limited. So sometimes I have to collect the data and then just start writing the story. But I don't want to collect data, which actually has happened, and then figure out I can't use this data for anything. After spending 1 month, and then you realize, okay, I cannot write a story out of out of this. But it makes you very economical in how you think. So you figure out, before I start collecting data, before I jump into it, I should have seen the end of the story, how it's supposed to read, before even trying to do it, because otherwise we'll get an email like, "Hey, where's your story for this week? We've not had a story for this week." One of the things that did really help me, I read The Economist, the magazine. So they have a weekly publication, which mostly is about politics, governance, and etc. And all their stories usually include charts, graphs, and etc. So I was reading this, and I'm like, "Oh, this story is so great. Even if you remove the charts and graphs, these stories are great." And that's when I had this aha moment. It's always about telling the story. It's about, can you be a good storyteller? Can you convince people? Can you give them a perspective? And then the data supplements whatever, or it reinforces the idea that you have. On the blog, I was working on from the different perspective. I have some data, I have some analysis skills applied to that. I want to see what comes out of that, and then write a story for that. Sometimes the story is great, sometimes it's not. But then it's always about story writing. It's about convincing people. It's about showing people a perspective, a way of saying like, okay, we are convinced. But sometimes you could tell people something, they're not convinced. Then you apply like, okay, actually, based on data about aircraft accidents for the past 60 years, Boeing has never had ABCD. So this is a very new phenomenon. So chances are that, and then so for that. But say focus more on telling the story. And then when there's a point that you need to convince people, then you include graphs, charts, and the analysis that you did.
Okay, so I guess it's the skill that you learn are key, like defining a problem statement with like clarity and communicating technical insights to a wide range of audience. I guess like just going back to you spoke about like data changing decision making in the corporate space. Do you see the same thing, like from your data journalism experience? Do you see the same thing happening with just like how policy is implemented in Africa? Do you see like policy becoming more data driven, or do you think that's more of an issue of an access to clean data again that prevents that from becoming like the norm?
Well, so you have to look at the decisions that are being made, how they're being made, and the effect of that decision is going to have on a community or the people who the policy applies to. So let me give an example, right? So we're gonna go data driven. So I'll go do some analysis, let's say about marriages. Then I'll tell you, actually, if you marry someone who is of the same education level as you, it increases your chances of divorce by 50%. Yeah. Let's assume it's data, right? Would you marry someone who is now below your education level to minimize divorce? Probably not, right? But it'll be like, no, maybe I'm the exceptional one. Maybe we love each other more. Blah 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 blah. Right? That's the same thing how policy works, right? When a government wants to make a decision, they look at so many things. Even sometimes, if the data goes against them, they still have to make a decision. And I'll give you a random example, right? Let's say in Kenya right now, we have a coastal city, and that's where the rest of other Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi countries, the landlocked countries, receive their goods through the port of Kenya. So one of the things that Uganda discovered oil, they're like, okay, we're going to have to make our pipelines go through Kenya, send it to the port city for export, in that case. So the Kenyans had to decide, like, okay, where will this pipeline follow? As a standard mathematical way, like, okay, you have to avoid, high net worth neighborhoods, and then use as much as possible the line of sight, right? That's data actually, like, okay, avoid high densely populated areas, But then someone know that, for example, that pipeline will need to have several stops where either the oil, I'm not an oil expert by any means, but I'm sure the pressure has to be increased, or there has to be some substations. And when you build a substation somewhere, it's going to attract a lot of economic interest. So now it's not more about what is the most efficient way of putting this line is where do we want to improve the area? We've had this project, so like you might think this is a madman because the final uh, proposal was if this is the line from Uganda to the coastal city, instead of the pipe going this way, it goes up and then it comes down. That like no, we want to improve the economic activities for that particular northern part. So let the pipeline follow that, and it's going to double the cost for that pipeline, and etc. So it becomes, it's not just about saying, okay, we've done this analysis, what it says. There's a whole context that people live in that, for my perspective, for now, data will play a very minimal role. There are areas where there's less controversy. There are areas where there's less, um, um, I'd call it a tug of war. So those areas, there could be an increase in policy. I mean, could an increase of use of data in making policies. But, things like health, for example, very sensitive data. Government are highly likely to say, like, okay, data is sensitive. Yes, we want to do the cost benefit. Can we, let's say, make this data open? Look at how many mothers die every year from malaria, how many people get infected with HIV, and etc. So I know those statistics, and then they use that to determine like where are we going to build a new hospital for that. So there's a very good, big public good, and general people will agree on that. So in that area, for me, I think there would be an increase or an improvement on the use of data for policy making. But in certain areas, especially where there's an economic benefit, that's where data gets thrown out of the window.
Yeah. This is interesting. It speaks to like the whole like data versus I guess like instinctual lived experience decision making like paradigm. So what I mean by that is that we make decisions that are based on our own like biases, and we look for confirming evidence that support our existing opinions to support like whatever want to choose. So it's not really like what you're saying. I'm guessing it's not like data can actually drive decisions like on a policy level, because people will look for data that confirms what they already like want to do anyway. Is that what you're saying? Like,
not really. I'm not saying that data will not be used in policy. I just said there are certain areas where the uptake of data-driven decisions will be very minimal, and there are certain areas where there's a general agreement that yes, we don't know enough about whatever is happening here, so we need to collect some data. And I'll give an example. So, like the northern part of Kenya is almost a desert. Only nomadic tribes live there, very bare and minimal infrastructure. So the government wants to invest in solar panels and other better energy, green energy for the benefit of the society. And then they realized, and this is a project I was about to work on, was they don't even know, like, you could go and say in a typical household in a city, they have propane tanks for cooking, they have electricity for lighting the house, and occasional maybe they have a kerosene stove to use whenever they cannot afford that, or some people use charcoal. So you want to know how many households use charcoal, how many of them use this, so that you can know where the intervention of bringing greener energies to households. But then northern Kenya, no one knows what is it, because they're nomads. They'll set up a house here today, and then tomorrow they're not there. So they ask, how many people use charcoal in this area? No one knows. How many people use propane tanks? No one knows. So in that case, then the government needs data-driven decision is the best way to go. So there will be adoption for in that particular area. Health, people really care about their health. Things like how many children are being born, where we should put the maternities. Other things like HIV, which is like a menace in this part of the world. So you need to know those numbers. And one of the things that it was some few weeks back, they're like, since the COVID pandemic started, about 3,000 underage girls are pregnant, right? So if no one was collecting that data at health facilities when they get testing, or when they visit the hospital for regular checkups, no one would have known that there's actually a very big problem that we need to get those girls out of there. We need to find something for that. So you see those areas, there'll be a much more higher uptake of data-driven decisions. But in areas like where there's economic benefit, I was telling you about No one wants to hear about data being used. They're like, we don't care whether the data says that this is the right way to follow. This is what we want. The same question I told you. If you're told that your marriage is likely to break down if you marry somebody, you're likely to say that statistic is bogus, or it doesn't apply to me, right? So we just something the way we make decisions correctly. Sometimes we just want to confirm whatever we already know, right? But other times it's not about confirming what we have, but you have a higher priority. You have, and this is one of the bigger problems. And if you read several books about data science, statistics, and they call it, and one of the famous writer says that we don't live in a probability space, we live in expectation place. What he meant, or what I understood he meant here, was that there is what they call expectation is, what is the final outcome are you looking to do, right? You have to understand everything else that has to do that. So whether you predict, okay, by I'm 99.9% accurate that this is going to happen, yes, but whatever you do, what impact is going to have on people? And actually, I just found a very good example to use. You remember the raid in Abbottabad to kill Osama bin Laden in Pakistan with the US Navy SEALs. So by the time they had a hunch that Osama bin Laden was living in that particular house, but they were not sure about it. So they even set up an observation house next door so that they can have that physical confirmation that that's Osama bin Laden. They even sent in people to do vaccination so that they can collect blood from everyone living in that house and then test it. So after doing all this, at some point, they were asked a question, all the different agencies, that how sure are you that Osama bin Laden is in that house? So based on what they did, they're like, okay, we've seen a tall man there. This house is well guarded. It must be someone very important. And we've seen armed people in there. So we were like 60%, sure or accurate. That's our accuracy level for that. Think of that as the algorithm. So the algorithm will take in all that data, look at this building, who's living there. No one has never left that building for a whole while. Those are parameters that you have. And then you say the 60% chance. So what do you do with 60%, right? So if they were 95% or thereabout that was Osama, or if they were 100% sure, they would have just bombed that house, right? And he'd have died. If they were 90%, they're like, we will bomb it, but we'll use precision bombing. As the accuracy goes down, they're like, no, we have to send in the SEALs. We have to go kill this guy, yeah, so that we're very sure that we killed him, right? So it tells you the decision you're making on this side, you care about other things. How can it be easily be detected? We launch a strike from this particular area. The accuracy level, sure, it's good, but at this point, it's done its part. End of story. You've told us you're 60% sure. That's your algorithm. Then now other people will have, so what options do we have? Yeah, what choices do we have? That's the same thing in everything else that you do. When you make your decision, sometimes numbers play a point, but then that number has done its part. Now you have to look at, we really have retaliation from Pakistan army. Right, those options. That's the business telling you, like, okay, if you do this, you're gonna lose customers because of this. If you do this, so that's why I go back to the problem or the environment. Part of your decisions will always be instinctual. They don't need numbers. They don't need any accurate predictions. They just need instinct. And I find things sometimes, and okay, I think, okay, I don't have anything to back this up, but instinct and what better than machines and algorithms?
Oh, that's a bold statement.
I think so, because I've been trying to read different things and to try to realign how I think and how I look at problems. Because if you're scared, if someone shoots a gun in the air, what's the first thing you do? You lie in the ground. Yes, you run, or you lie in the ground to protect yourself. That's
Or you
instinct.
just cry.
Yeah. So think about, we replace that with a chip in your head. That, okay, maybe that sound, let me wait for the second gunshot so that I can have more data to decide whether I should lie down or or not. By the time the second bullet is flying, it will be for your head and you'll be gone. So in that case, instinct work much better than data.
That makes sense. My concern is that people have just biases they have based on their previous experiences that may kind of cloud their instinctual reaction towards different things. So I guess I'm also a bit concerned about like people relying more on instinct than data because we're just very flawed thinkers in so many ways, and it's just impacted by so many things we don't have it. We don't like we're not fully aware of basically. The things that may have happened in your past that may influence how you think about things, which kind of clouds your judgment, I suppose.
Yeah, that's very true. Definitely, our experiences more often than not informs us. Even the reason why we lie down when someone has shot in the air is because we saw someone getting shot, and that's history that we've carried in our minds, and it's stored there, which is a good thing in some cases. I think data has its limits. Uh, Whatever it can provide you with, it has its own limitations. You cannot replace the whole human decision-making process using algorithms. That will definitely just go haywire. Maybe it might happen in 2090, 21, something, I don't know, something new, quantum computing, all that kind of stuff. Might render us, our brains, useless, and we rely everything on that. We don't know. But as for now, what we know and everything has been observed is that, to me, what I've come to figure out is like, at what point do I need data? At what point do I need to include it for the decision making to be clearer? And I've just given you an example. Was, when you don't know what's happening, always collect data. When you don't know what's happening, do some analysis for that case. Start getting a better picture than you have. If you have enough data to give you some glimpse, and okay, most of the time when people are talking about data science, you're also talking about predictions. You're trying to predict something in the future. There's also a lot of class of statistics just to understand what has happened before, what's currently happening, and that one puts that prediction into a context. Because sometimes if you just make predictions, you don't like the prediction in itself is not useful per se, or it might not get you the end goal of what you want. And as I was reading this, I don't know if you've read about Nicholas Taleb. He's come to influence so many things that I do, and it came when I just read the book called Super Forecasters by Richard Thaler. And so Richard Thaler, he worked on some interesting projects, and then he set up this called the Good Judgment Project. The work was to help governments, corporations, and other entities to make certain predictions using crowdsourced intelligence for that case. So if we ask, let's say, what number of deaths let's say I'm a government agency and I'm interested to know how many people will die of COVID. So they put that problem into the website. People will argue out or put the predictions up there. So you put your prediction accuracy level, and you can also include whatever data source or reason why to make you that. Then we average everyone's predictions, and then we get a prediction for a particular case. So that was Richard Taylor did that, and then Nassim Taleb came and say like, all everything that you did there is nonsense, because it means nothing. If you and he talks about this thing about skinning the game and how decision making works, and one of the best ways. So like, just telling me there's a 90% chance that a million people would die from a certain disease is not enough, or apart from being enough, sometimes doesn't even matter. Just close the goddamn borders and don't worry about anything else. End of story. Stop wasting your time with because closing the border is a far much effective way of solving the problem than saying like, okay, we know a million people are going to die, blah 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 blah. So it's like sometimes those predictions are pointless. Or if you live in the real world and it argues like, what will your grandmother do? Your grandmother will outlive you because she can see danger and take action and won't kill her time doing regression analysis to figure out whether and then you see what they call evidence-based policy, evidence research, evidence-based da da da. And most of the time I was just listening to this to a podcast, and it's like, hey, the place where the evidence-based line fails is because if you're in a plane and you have to jump out, the logical thing to do is to carry a parachute and then open it up when you're going down. And then he said at that point, a scientist or a data scientist can say that there is no evidence to prove that putting on a parachute will save your life. It's like you don't need to like throw 100 people from a plane. Yeah. But the essence you're saying that sometimes you don't need that research. There's certain things like instinct. There's certain things that tell you this is the right thing to do, and you can stop. I think close the borders, let everyone put on their mask, test everyone. Yes, there's no point in launching any data science thing. But another thing was also understanding how you apply different methods to different areas in whatever problem you're solving. There could be a sub problem which might require application of data science, and then you solve that, or you get a better picture for that, and then you use that. You can incorporate it to everything else. So always look at the context. Always look at, I could have solved this way much easier. Yeah, and I know there's this famous, it's like a story joke, if you've heard about it, that there's a guy who had a very tall building, and he had an elevator. So since there were so many floors, it was taking a lot of time for the lift to come back and pick people when it goes to different floors. And then the manager was complaining. I mean, the tenants were complaining about everything else. So the owner of the building went and got somebody else to come and like, okay, I need a faster elevator here. Like, okay, what's the newest model? Da, 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 da. Then the guy told him like, okay, talk about me what has happened. Yeah, don't tell me you need a faster. So I'm like, okay, what has been happening? All these guys come in, they stand here, they wait for very long, they get pissed. So I think I should fix them a better thing. They're like, okay. So so he quoted like, crazy amount of money, like, I don't know, $100 million or something like that. This guy came in, sat there, watched this everyone, and then I don't know, he drew like a flyer or like a photo in each floor. So when everyone came in, when they were, he said, I'm done with the work. The guy was like, you don't even started. It's like, no, I've finished my work. So everyone would come in there, and then while they're waiting for the lift, they will stare at the photos, and they will even forget that they're waiting for a lift. And then the complaints completely disappeared, and he solved the problem. He did not need to a faster elevator. I was like, just by drawing cartoons on the wall, he could make people forget that they were waiting for the lift. For that case, that's why you have to think about where you are. It's not about. They literally say that if you hold a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you. Yeah. So if you have data science skills, everything looks like predict this, predict that, predict this, which is not the case. There are better ways of solving problems and easier ways.
Okay, I guess again, I read this one analogy that's kind of similar to what you're saying, right? And I think it's from Nassim Nicholas Taleb too. He says like if you find a river that's on average, I think 4 feet tall, don't cross it, because data without context is like it doesn't really tell you much. It's just an average. It's a thing.
Sorry for forgetting. Yeah, I think what he meant by that was mostly about the misuse of statistics, because he said if on average, let's say a river is 4 feet deep, which means at certain times or at certain areas that river is, let's say, 12 feet deep. So if you decide you're going to cross the river, then you get into the point that it was 12 feet deep, then you're going to sink and you're going to die. You're going to drown and die. So using average as a metric doesn't make sense at all, because if the first thing, you have to survive an event or a scenario. So if at that decision point, should I cross this river? That's the decision you're supposed to make. And then you're supplied with the data that, oh yeah, you can cross it because it's on average, it's 4 feet deep. But on that day, it rains, or you're at the point where that river is 12. Like, actually supplied you the right information. It didn't supply you the wrong information. But you can't make that decision using average. You can only make it using the extremes for that, because if the extreme is that it's 12 feet deep, then you're like, no, I won't cross this river because I'm likely to drown. So he most putting like and when he talks about all his books and even including this pandemic, was that if we make a some focused and say we expect 1 million people to die, that's on average because all other pandemics killed on average 10% of the infected population. Then all of a sudden something happens, or the virus mutates, or something, and then all of a sudden now it's ravaging everyone else. So his idea was misuse of statistics, but also you can see at this point whether we have data. Someone who just has instinct, like, no, I'm not going to cross this river. He's going to survive, and the person like, no, I know averages, I'm going to pass. Then he'll not survive in that particular case. Is if you look at decision making, from a philosophical perspective, and especially, and then to him, I think he's focusing more on things that are likely to break society, and he says those are the only things that matter in life, because if something is likely to threaten your life, that's what you should focus on and make decisions to that. And even the idea of like just lock down a city is like, hey, we don't know anything about this virus, we don't know anything about everything else, why should we even try anything else? And then you say like data scientists, statisticians, researchers who are like, no, we have the fanciest of new tools from our tool set, we can now do some fancy algorithms, they throw it into like, no, actually this pandemic won't last for long because it's reaching its peak time, and then you make a decision on that prediction, and then all of a sudden things change, and like, okay, now more people are dying. So you told us this thing has reached its peak infection rate based on your modeling for that. So why are we having more people? Our hospitals are overstretched, and etc. So I recommend you read a book. His favorite book to me is Fooled by Randomness, which tells the story of how someone thought he was smart and he was making money, and then at some point he blew up and lost his thing. So it's a more of a cautionary tale about, come on, this statistic thing has its limits. It has a way, because if you're interested in being okay, if you're interested in surviving, the basic things you have to do, and one of them is when you realize you don't know anything about anything else, don't even do any modeling. Just take the basic precautionary measures, you'll be good. All right. But if it's not a death versus survival kind of thing, then it's the okay. I have 3 examples to illustrate this. One, think about, you've gone to Amazon, you want to buy, whatever, a radio. I don't know if people still buy radios nowadays. Anything you want to buy online, and then there's a product recommendation, and then like maybe sometimes it's accurate, maybe it's not. Like, oh, customers who bought this book also bought this. Okay, if that algorithm is wrong 30% of the time, let's say it's 70% accurate, would you feel harmed in any way? Like, you won't even be bothered. Okay. Now let's think of a system which looks at evidence and decides whether you're going to be imprisoned or not. So instead of a judge, we replace a judge with an algorithm. How much would you like to be judged with an algorithm? You're like hell no, right? Think of a diagnosis being made by a doctor. So we take away the doctors and like, okay, you're freaking out. Maybe I have some, I don't know, STDs. Oh yeah, this algorithm thinks that maybe there's a chance that you have this. Like, no, I'll take this test 10 times to ensure that I have none. From a technology perspective, this is still the same algorithm. It's just ingesting data, provided a target variable that makes a prediction. But you'll realize there are certain areas in your life that you don't want algorithms to make a decision for you. In other areas, you're like, I don't mind if Amazon is missing my recommendations. Okay, it got the last 10 right, now it's missed 2. So you don't really feel anything for that. But when it comes to life, you really care more about it. You want a human to do your test. So I think that's the kind of explanation as hoping to make.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I think you can see it more of as we're kind of like new to this like world we're driven by technology. It's like it's a new paradigm to us, and we're still not comfortable like letting technology or data drive certain decisions that are like very important. That's like you're saying that the life threatening, like big decisions in our lives. But maybe as time goes on, we become more comfortable with like data permeating other decision making parts of our life. Maybe that's the trend the world is moving towards. I don't know. What are your thoughts, I suppose?
So let's think about our other areas of life. Also, there's more to. Oh, let me find it. Yeah, think about you going home, right? And then there's an argument like, no, today you're gonna have some meat and some, I don't know, rice plus da da da. It's going to, let's assume that case. Would you want to leave work or whatever you're doing and come back home and like, I know today I feel like some, I don't know, some burgers, or I feel like something like that. If you're to, your brain is no longer thinking, and now so you come home and then you're walking and then ding ding, welcome Emmanuel. Today you're going to have some rice and some chicken. How would you love that?
I think if it's based on my previous behavior, I might be open to it, like personally.
But at some point, you're like, no, today I want to go in a different way, because you will feel some part of your life is being robbed away. You just want that.
Okay.
I want to wake up and decide what I want to eat. I don't want an algorithm that's tracking every tiny little thing. But if you have a health condition that you have to have a restricted diet, right? But you also still want to enjoy a few things about, different types of, food. If today's like, okay, today you're going to have one glass of milk, so that it keeps you in that diet. How would you love that? Yeah, it will be great, because your chances of making a bad decision, it's pretty much limited. Or you're trying to lose weight, and then you come and then you have an app on your phone that recommends what food you have to eat today, what quantity. Maybe it can even measure your heartbeat. It can measure your, I don't know, sugar levels. And based on all that, it's like today you ate too much starch, so today you're going to reduce on starch and you're going to eat. Then you're going to take it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think my point is that there's certain areas in life where we just want to ask ourselves that it doesn't matter whether we will be in 2090 or whatever, you still want that humanness, because there are places where you apply technology, it removes the humanness in that aspect for life. The areas where if you apply technology, it improves the quality of life. You think about life support systems. Think about people diet and etc. By introducing better automated decision-making tools, it improves their way of life. But in certain areas where if you introduce technology, it actually demeans or degrades the quality of life that you're having.
Mm-hmm. And speaking just like as a last question, like from a corporate perspective, do you see a pushback when you like try to, I guess, use data to guide a decision, like versus what maybe someone in that particular, someone who you're addressing, who's the stakeholder, like has an instinctual view of the market space that isn't confirmed by the data that you're providing them. Do you see like a pushback from that like relationship in the corporate space? It is.
Yeah, so definitely there'll always be pushbacks. But my thought, especially when it's a purely financial decision, the data always wins. Do we go with your gut instinct that you know about this, you've worked in this area for 15 years, or do we go by what the data tells us? So the data wins, because especially when you do some analysis and it goes against whatever someone had held as a truth or what they know, then okay, you're actually attacking them in that particular sense. Pushback is expected. Now it's up to you as a data scientist to convince that you're like, actually, that's why when you do an analysis, you say, this is the data I used, these are the methods that I applied, these are the conclusion I came up with, so that when he or she is pushing back, he's not pushing back on you, he's pushing back on the data you used or on the methodologies applied. then it can tell you, like, you looked at a very limited time. What about you pick data instead of 5 years, pick data for 10 years and see if this trend is still there, right? And instead of using this method, this is not a proper comparison method of periods, because this product behaves this way, so you need to compare this data. Then you do that again, and then your conclusion is still there. Then I'm like, okay, he has no other choice than accepting that. So when it comes to purely financial decisions, there's pushback, but usually data always wins.
Okay. I have a lot more questions to ask, but I think that for time's sake and for audience sake, it's maybe time to like wind things up a little bit. But yeah, thank you so much for your time and taking the time to explain things to us that are very fascinating and interesting. And we appreciate your insights, and it'd be great to have you like at some other stage whenever you're free time to chat a bit more about your opinions and thoughts on different things.
Sure. Very much welcome. Whenever I have time, I should be able to join you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Jasmine.
All right. Cheers.
All righty. So it's a wrap.
Cool.